Okay, right. Everyone, up on their toes. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay, so this is joint of the week numero uno, number 1, on the shoulder. My beautiful colleague Margaret will come in shortly. She has an audio-visual presentation of the highest quality. Now, this is the witching hour. After lunchtime. What happens after lunchtime when you get to any group and things like that? It's... So, obviously, Zoran and Jenny have thought, oh, we'll just give it to those people over there to keep them occupied. This has got nothing to do with the shoulder joint whatsoever, but I just read in today's paper that everyone knows David Attenborough. Yep. Anyone not know who David Attenborough is? We've all grown up with. David Attenborough is a very well-known British science commentator, and he's made natural history programs for at least 5 decades. So, and he basically pretty much invented the art of natural history programming on television. And he's still going strong in his mid-80s. If you notice recently, he was very dodgy in his movements. But apparently he's just had 2 new knees a couple of weeks ago, and apparently he thinks he's going to do very well from 2 new knees. So that's a very esteemed science communicator, and that's basically modern technology is keeping him going. So he may or may not know about Feldenkrais or whatever, but basically that's what modern life is doing for his knees rather than Feldenkrais's knees. As I said, it's got nothing to do with the shoulder joint. Okay. I've taken my text today from this book, The Anatomy of Movement, by a French physiotherapist. She was a dancer first and then trained in physio. Her name is Blandine Calais-Germain.
You are required to pronounce this correctly.
Yes, Blandine Calais-Germain. Because I don't have any real anatomical training or of any sort, particularly a tiny bit, trying to get information on anatomy physiology, I'm sure everyone has done, is scary, horrible, big stuff. You know, the books are big and they've got horrible words and things like that. I find this is quite approachable. You know, it's not easy peasy, but it's still quite approachable. So if you're like me and you actually need a bit of a helping hand, I find this book is really good. So I'm going to just basically steal from this book. The shoulder joint. Right. Yes. I'll leave it at I'll leave it at the back at the end, but it's called The Anatomy of Movement. Sorry. I don't want to leave it there because somebody will buy it.
She wants you to speak it so they can hear it on the tape.
You already said it.
The book is The Anatomy of Movement by Blandine Calais-Germain.
No interruptions.
There's a companion volume called The Anatomy of Exercises, which basically goes through the same format, but showing body movement from an exercise perspective. The shoulder. Depends exactly what you read as to what the shoulder is. The shoulder joint, some would basically just narrow it down to this glenohumeral joint. So between the humerus, the top of the arm, and the scapula, the shoulder blade here. Not at the same time. We're going to go through this again.
Yeah.
Unless you've got the exact same picture as my talk.
Practically, almost. We're just doing it in different orientations.
Yes. If you talk about the shoulder girdle, you've got the collarbone, the clavicle here, 1, 2. The joint to the clavicle with the sternum, and the joint to the scapula, the shoulder blade here. So actually you can consider the shoulder girdle as involving 3 joints, which means that in terms of movement, you're not just restricted to moving this alone. The interesting thing about probably one of the main things I picked up from that book was the concept of this shoulder blade, the scapula, floating, which I find a very nice image. So if you're just sitting there at the moment, if you can think of your shoulder blades and just think of the possibility of them being a floating mechanism. So it's a very nice big triangular bone here. There's a sheaths of muscular activity underneath, just separating it from the ribs, but those should be allowed to basically just be a sort of flotation. This flotation can go up, floating up. So floating, not pushing, not pulling, not heaving, not teasing. Well, teasing maybe. Teasing and floating the shoulder blade. Teasing and folding. And so we can go down with it. We can tease it up. We can tease it sideways, in and out, medially and laterally. We can tease it at an angle. Tease it at an angle upwards. Tease an angle downwards. So this great sort of ability of the shoulder blade to float allows, amongst other things, the shoulders to go from a fixed position like this. We've all seen somebody like that. To a fixed position like that. Or a fixed position like this. Or a fixed position. Oh, God. Well, that's what some people are like. Or a fixed position like this. How much do these cost? One thing I did learn in the book was that basically it is considered that shoulder joint, particularly they're talking about the glenohumeral joint here, between the top of the arm bone and the shoulder blade, is considered to be the joint in the body that has the most availability in terms of rotation. The one with the most rotational possibilities, it can pretty much go 360 degrees, any angle, anywhere. That stability is fantastic. The compromise for that is that the strength and stability can be compromised in that. So in terms of dislocations or in terms of ligament damage, they can happen very easily. One other aspect here, the clavicle, the collarbone, I read, somebody can put me right on this, I read that that is the bone in the body that's most likely to be broken. Most likely to be broken. That itself doesn't have too much strength, and if basically someone's falling or something on their arm, rigidity, those pressures will go straight up there and break that. So does that seem sort of right? Oh, physio, OT experts? And we read different books, didn't we?
We did.
Okay. Of course, that was from a French person, so maybe they're French clavicles. Yes. I'm going to, are we okay for time? Okay for time? Okay. So coming back to the three joints of the shoulder girdle. Okay. So maybe if you can consider, coming back to this flotation, if you can consider just placing one hand on your collarbone.
Microphone, did you say?
Placing one hand on... This is a game of Simple Simon, actually. So, yeah. So placing one hand on your collarbone, and then coming back to that flotation of the scapula. So floating your shoulder blade up, floating your shoulder blade down. How, it's supposed to be keeping the collarbone straight. How floatable is that? Now let the collarbone go and carry on with the floating. Try with the head of the humerus at the top of the arm, hold that into your body. So you're keeping that sturdy, and then try the flotation of the scapula. So the scapula has got some flotation ability while others are held. Let everything go and come back to the flotation of the scapula. Does that make any difference to the ease of the movement? If you might want to stand up for this, this might make it easier. If you want to consider now just taking the arms up like this, thinking of that scapular movement. Now also think about in terms of the ribs coming into it, what's happening within the ribs. Are they opening as we go up? Because according to the book, they should. So again, so that's basically the shoulder to the arms. Okay, at some stage, you're going to want the ribs to open up as well. So now try it, basically hold the ribs. Try with that same arm movement up, but hold the ribs tight. Oh, Simon can do this whatever way. Now, so bring the arms in front, like that, yeah. Yeah. And now give the ribs some freedom to move and do that. Same thing coming behind. So you won't get as much movement in the arms through that shoulder behind. So try that with
I just have to adjust the technology.
So this time the arm's coming back here, so moving in the shoulder joint. And try it with a sort of, one or two of you may have a stiff back. Try it with a fairly stiff back. And then try it allowing the movement to be easier in the back. So allow the spine to breathe with it, allow the spine, those vertebrae, to actually go with it. So there's a difference. And to my mind, the habit that Feldenkrais talks about and others are in his genre is the habit that those are 3 or 4 different possibilities, but we tend to get one particular habit that is predominant. We wake up in the morning, we've got a resting pattern of habit that, particularly with our shoulders or whatever, we might hold our one shoulder blade to ourselves and not allow that to float. We might reach up for the cupboard and not allow those ribs to breathe. We might fix our scapula here, so our shoulder blades, our clavicles here. So all of those possibilities are potentially where we can bring in, and we've got an infinite number of varieties. And yet, the potential is that basically, if we allow our soft muscular system to happen, we've got swimming action, we've got boxing action, we've got loving action, we've got making the tea action, hugging, that's right. That's the loving, yes. Well, you can't have too much, can you? Yes. All of that from the mobility of those joints there. Okay. And now, my esteemed, beautiful colleague, Margaret, will do the audio-visual presentation. You can probably sit down, I suppose. But
Can you please take that out of your pocket?
oh, I'm just pleased to see you. Thank you.
Device.
We haven't practiced this, by the way.
Yes, we have. We took hours to get that handover. Did you see how carefully we put that on his neck? This doesn't work. Hello, you can stand or sit. Okay. Yes, no. That's bizarre. All right, good, fine. The interesting thing I found about the shoulder itself, it helped me understand the pelvis, which has got big concave shapes on it and is a pelvic girdle, which is really scary for me and I can't get my head around it. But I started to understand that structure by looking at the shoulder girdle or the humeropectoral girdle or whatever name. There's about 4 different names. There are disagreements about what it's called and which bit constitute it and something else. So this is just a collage of bits and pieces that interested me about the shoulder joint. 3 bones, 2 main joints, which my esteemed colleague has already talked about. One's under here, right? And the other one's here. I love the scapula. I think it's an amazing shape of bone. So it's got 2 right in what are considered part of the actual shoulder joint, and then it's got 2 more that make it part of the shoulder girdle that Ray talked about. And there's about over 1,500 possible positions with your shoulder. When this whole, yeah, get that. This isn't just the most mobile joint in the body. That's phenomenal. Let's go and play the next bit. These are its little bits, some of the names that are helpful to know. Here's my favourite bone, the scapula. The acromion is the part that sticks over the top, yeah, and comes down and makes a little place for the clavicle to hang on to. And that's what connects the shoulder blade to the rest of the body. In fact, there are 4 joints that play with the shoulder girdle, and one of those actually does connect the shoulder blade or the scapula at the back, and we'll talk about that a bit later. So because it's, as Ray said, such a delicate structure, there's something like, I think it's, is it 15 or 30, no, 30, might be 30% of that top part of your arm touches into the socket. It's really, really super shallow. So it's got a little lip like an oyster, like, you know, those bivalve little creatures from the sea. And you can see where that is. I've got to walk because I have to. This is actually the head of one of your big arm muscles, and it goes over the top of this area here. This is between. So there's the head of your humerus, and this little bone coming over the top is the top of your scapula. This doesn't show it very nicely, but it actually has a lot of nice negative shape to hold that in. And here is the glenoid. The glenoid, which is the space that the actual bone goes into. It doesn't actually touch the actual bone, of course, because it's got lots of little bits and pieces to stop it doing that. Otherwise, you'd die of pain because or would you die of pain because your bones were rubbing? Does it hurt if your bones rub? Really? How do you know it hurts if your bones rub? Do bones have nerves? That's a question. Does anybody know? Do bones have nerves? Does bone on bone hurt? Does it? Why? I'm asking, does bone on bone hurt? I've got no idea. Thank you. So over the end of all your bones, you have a very thin membrane which has nerve endings in it, and that's what hurts. Good. So I wanted to get to this because the idea of bones hurting was like, well, hang on, where are the nerves? There's a really cool little tutorial on television, I'll talk about it now on YouTube, where the guy goes through all the little bits and pieces, and he does actually show a couple of slides where he's got a nice little 3D rotating skeleton, which I love. I love playing with that. I played with it till 3 o'clock in the morning last night because that was such fun. And I wanted to know, where are the nerves involved in this? And a lot of these texts I found didn't give me enough explanation of how things actually functioned. And how the different bits work together. And that was the thing that annoyed me about the medical models. So I went trawling through those with my little Feldenkrais feelers out and picked out all the things that said, yes, there are connections, because that's what I was interested in. So this connection I'm interested in here is this one. This is the top of the tendon of one of your long arm muscles. It goes over that shoulder sac and into the back of and becomes part of the lip that holds the humerus. And I just think that's so elegant. It's really beautiful. So there's the bits. 3 bones. Here are my bony landmarks. You know all of these. What you don't know is this one. All right, I have to show you this one because I love it. This is a little tiny bit of my 3D skeleton. It's called inner body. There's one called zygote body, and there's one called something like Being Human, 2015. And they're basically interactive 3-dimensional pictures, and you just muck about with them. It's better than Google Maps. And the cool thing is, like, you can click on them so you can see the shape of things. And the reason I chose this one is because it shows, this is the back, right? This is the front, actually. But this is the back of the shoulder blade. Your shoulder blade is not on your back. Your shoulder blade is a little curving piece that comes over the top and up underneath. I just think that's amazing as a structure. I think it's a beautiful structure. And if you look at down from on top, you can see all these kind of spaces because it's a 3-dimensional thing. It's not just a flat bone. And I've always thought of bones, because I'm inexperienced, as being long and skinny or flat. But the fact that the thing has an actual really huge shape was a real surprise. It's like a piece of sculpture, and I can understand why Jean Arp made those amazingly gorgeous little globulous shapes that he made back in the 1950s and 60s, because that's what the shoulder blade actually is like. So somewhere up there, there's going to be a website to show you this. So here you have the back of your shoulder blade with this bit. You know that bit? Got your fingers on that bit? Yeah. It's the bit that sticks out. It's the bit most people would say is their shoulder blade, because it's the bit that sticks out. It's kind of really obvious. And that goes right out to the side, and that's what comes over your shoulder in a nice little dolphin nose and forms the piece. So your clavicle actually starts out here, right out on the edge of things. Your clavicle actually starts right out here, which is amazing when you think about it. And of course, it's attached here. If you put your fingers in the front in the sternum, you can feel, when you move your little shoulders forward and back, you can feel that little joint. And that's the 3rd joint of the shoulder girdle. Let's have a look at the other ones. There's the acromioclavicular joint, blah, blah, blah. Words are hard. That's the one that's right up here. This is the one that your scapula and your clavicle, that's their little connection. So that's really important. Imagine if you didn't have that there, right? It's the strut. Like on aeroplanes, they have struts to hold the wings out, right? This is the struts that hold out your wings. And they support the rest of the humerus, which is in here. There's stuff all of that ball sitting in the socket. The socket's really shallow, and that's why it's got this little piece in here. It's called a laburnum. It's like a skin that holds it in place. Labrum. See, I don't even know laburnum. I'm thinking of the tree. I remember reading a really good book about a bloke who loved a laburnum better than anything in the universe. 2 joints, and there they are. The glenohumeral and the acromioclavicular joint. One of them's flat and one of them's kind of ball and socket. And so this idea that the shoulder joint is your shoulder is not quite accurate, according to various people. It depends whether you're talking about the shoulder joint or the shoulder girdle, because the girdle actually includes your clavicle. So this is the end. This is what it looks like if somebody took your, ready? You know, like in raptors and adaptors, and they rip aliens and they just rip your arm off? Right, if they ripped your arm off, this is what you'd see. This is the glenoidal cavity. That's the inside of your shoulder blade. You can't actually feel it. All you can get if you go in here is the top of your ribs, because it's somewhere up in there. No, I can't get to it. And you can also see here, so this little piece is called the joint capsule, and that's really important because that helps protect your shoulder. And enable it to actually move. And then over the top of that, they've got all kinds of biceps muscle. So your biceps muscle, which is down here, that's the tendon of it, becomes part of the little, sorry, what was that word again? Labrum. The little plasticky, it's like having, you know, when you have jars and they've got a little plastic lip and you can close them properly. And there's lots and lots of ligaments in this that hold it in place. If it didn't have all the ligaments, it actually wouldn't be able to work. Hello, can we do another one? No, I can't. You want me to finish now? No, I'm not finishing. So this is a look at some of the ligaments. I liked this picture because it showed the amount of wrapping that goes around your shoulder. So under here, this is actually the shoulder capsule. You've got, and these are very, very large ligaments. This is the inferior glenohumeral. So I don't know what that means. I guess that means inside rather than on the back. Up the top here, you've got the acromion, which is the top of the shoulder blade from the spine. And here's your clavicle coming off there. And as you can see, this little fellow here, whose nose I've forgotten. What's the second dolphin nose bone? Coracoid. So this is your coracoid process, this little bone that sticks down underneath. And you can see all these ligaments that attach those things so that they can actually move but not fall to pieces. The next layer is your rotator cuffs. Your rotator cuffs are cool, and I picked this picture because it shows you the front. So this is the inside of your scapula, and this is the back of your scapula. And you can see the four major muscles, front and back, that hold your shoulder joint into place. Please notice that the top of this is still free, right? So this is what's holding the shoulder humerus. And you've still got that little coracoid sticking out, and you've still got the acromion at the top there, which sticks out the top. I love the way this muscle goes inside the back of your scapula. And that gives it more. So this is the sits muscles, and they help protect and stabilize it. In fact, if you didn't have them, you wouldn't be stabilized at all. This is just to give you some idea of how many muscles actually attach into the shoulder or pectoral girdle, because it's not just about your shoulder. You've got all these muscles that are attached to your ribs, and this is from the front, right? So this is what you can see on the inside of the scapula, and then this is the front part of your scapula. So there's actually a whole bunch of muscles that are actually holding and connecting to all the different parts of the ribs and down through the arms. What I found really interesting is that under this mob, I'll see if I can find the next set of muscles. There's one more that I wanted. This is your deep muscles and your superficial muscles. So if you want to think about what your shoulder girdle does, check out where the muscles go. Like this is most of your upper spine, and these ones go up into your neck, and they're attached to your clavicle, and they're attached to the scapula. There didn't seem to be so many of them at the front, but there were more at the back. And then you've got the superficial muscles as well. These ones on the arm help. The deltoids and the trapezoids and so forth help stabilize that shoulder even further so it can actually move around. And they gave there's a whole lot of detail about how much movement you can get out of a shoulder blade. None of them mentioned that you could go 360 with a bucket of water, which I was rather disappointed about because, yeah, I might have 130 degrees, but actually I've got more than 130 degrees. So I'm not sure about whether the information that they tell you about how much people can move when they can move their joints is actually accurate, because people might do other things with their bodies that they don't know about. Down here you can see, now there's going to be a scapula under here. There's just in here, there are these side muscles, and that's where the muscles under your scapula and above your spine actually sort of work together. And they're attached. They attach through the muscle sheath, which is called fascia. And so this makes almost, it's not a true joint. It's not like a joint that hangs onto something and there's two pieces. It's not bony at all. It's more ligamenture. But that's the bottom end that actually anchors your scapula. So your scapula doesn't actually just float, flopping around. It's actually connected at the back of you. And it's connected into the ribs, which those muscles sit over. This is the shoulder girdle. When they talk about that, they're talking about your clavicle and your scapula. And you can see the main joints, the glenohumeral joint, the acromion. This is the one at the front. This is what attaches the back of your body to your axial spine. And when I was thinking about this, it's like, this is why you can actually move around your central axis, and that's why you've got so much more to move with, and you can discriminate between your shoulders and your neck if you want to move, or the bottom half of your from the upper half of your spine, because you've got these joints in place. And I have to say, I think the scapula is my favourite thing so far. So in each shoulder and pectoral girdle, you have 5 joints, not 3, and about 20 muscles on each side that help you move properly. It's what actually holds your body together. The upper limbs, your army things, to your, is this your axial skeleton? Right, sorry, that's the straight bit. Thank you. It attaches the muscles of your upper back, your chest, and your neck. So if you're having problems with your head, you're going to be looking at what's attached to people's shoulders. I experienced that in one of our study groups when Simon, very simply, when we were doing the pelvic croc, exploring people's shoulders, get up and walk, people explore your shoulders, you get up and walk again. He spent about 7 minutes exploring my shoulder blades, and I got up and walked, and everyone went, oh my God, your head is in a totally different position. And all he did was track my shoulder girdle. I was really impressed. The reason I like the scapula so much is because all of the joints, the 3 joints in the scapula, are what make it possible for that connection to take place. The shoulder girdle acts as a unit, so your clavicles and your scapula at the back. I like the shape of this. If you whiz this bloke around, you've got this nice flat bit here, and if you whiz him around, on the back of your scapula, you've got this nice big fat spine that kind of makes, that's what makes the triangle, that's what makes it strong, that's what gives it its like real structural stability. So all these things are connected, and the shoulder girdle doesn't function separately to your cervical spine. This is the one thing I found in the medical textbooks that suggested to me that yes, things are connected. And in fact, your lower cervical spine, up in your neck, I don't know what the cervicothoracic junction is, but I would think it's what we were playing with yesterday when we were walking along, which is thoracic 8 and cervical 7 or something. I don't know how they work, but that's what we were feeling as we were walking along. And that and the upper thoracic spine, to which it is connected via the costovertebral. This is the stuff in your spine. Yeah, the costovertebral joints. This is actually in your spine. So this idea that your scapula or the shoulder girdle isn't connected to the rest of it doesn't seem to be quite accurate. There are joints in there and they are connected, although not by obvious bony processes. They won't function, none of it will function properly unless all of it's functioning properly. Finishing bits. Things you might want to do with your scapula. I just think this is hysterical. Depression, elevation, downward rotation. This is from an anatomy studies for yoga teachers. I loved it. This one, I really like this girl. I like this girl doing depression and elevation because you can see all the musculature that's attached to that. And you can see all the muscles in her neck and upper thorax. And I like the people on the right-hand side because I think they're just hysterical too. I don't think anybody actually does that. But if you're lifting, carrying, swinging people around the dance floor and so forth, you're going to need it. The other relationship I really like was this one. There are muscles that elevate the ribs and assist in breathing, and they're actually attached to your scapula, right? So playing with your scapula is also going to improve your breathing, not because your ribs move, but because these muscles actually are attached to it. So if you're playing with one part of the body, there's a whole heap of other relationships that it has to other parts, not directly, but necessarily. But I thought that was really wonderful. So this is all attached. The pectoralis minor and the serratus anterior, they're attached to your scapula, and the subclavicus, which is under your clavicle, this one is attached to the bottom surface of the clavicle. And I liked this fact that all these bits and pieces are attached to my scapula. or which is on my back, and I don't think of my breathing as being there. I think of my lungs as being here, but in fact, without those muscles that are attached to my scapula, if my scapula is not functioning properly, then my breathing is going to not function properly either. These are the websites I played with. The inner body one has the most pictures of the skeleton and the arm. The YouTube tutorial was some nice American bloke. That was fairly easy. And I looked at things like www.orthopedic medicine online until they asked me to subscribe. It's like, no, thank you. So, and that's, yeah, that's kind of what I had fun with. And I want to show you my last picture. Hello, darling. I just like this. I like this interactive website. This is the 2D one. It's my favourite joint in the universe at the moment. Thank you very much. You have been listening to Joint of the Week, presented by Margaret and Ray. Stay tuned for our next exciting instalment. Hold on.
I'll stick this book on the back with the sign-in sheet.
And now.